The Battle of 73 Easting was a decisive tank battle fought on 26 February 1991, during the Gulf War, between United States Armored Forces of the 7th Corps and those of the Iraqi Republican Guard UNIT's Tawakalna Division. It was named for a UTM north-south coordinate line in the featureless desert that was used as a phase line to measure progress of the offensive. The battle was later described in a documentary of the battle as the last great tank battle of the 20th century. This battle took place several hours after another key tank battle known as the Battle of Al-Busayr. The main U.S. unit in the battle was the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, a 4,500-man reconnaissance and security element assigned to 7th Corps. It consisted of 3 ground squadrons, an aviation squadron, and a support squadron. Each ground squadron was made up of 3 cavalry troops, a tank company, a self-propelled howitzer battery, and a headquarters troop. Each troop comprised 120 soldiers, 12 13 M3 Bradley fighting vehicles and 9 M1A1 Abrams main battle tanks. Task Force 1-41 infantry performed counter-reconnaissance missions prior to the 2nd ACR's actions. This generally includes destroying or repelling the Iraqis' reconnaissance elements and denying their commander any observation of friendly forces. The Corps' main body consisted of the American 3rd Armored Division and 1st Infantry Division and 2nd Armored Division and 1st Armored Division, and the British 1st Armored Division. The job of the 2nd ACR was to advance east as a forward scouting element, led by cavalry scouts in M2A3 Bradleys with highly advanced thermals to detect enemy positions. Following closely behind were M1A1 Abrams tanks covering them from the rear, ready at a moment's notice to move forward and engage the enemy. Originally advancing ahead of the 3rd Armored Division until late on February 25, they would shift to the east and be ahead of the advancing 1st Infantry Division as it moved north from its initial objectives. The regiment's mission was to strip away enemy security forces, clear the way of significant defenses and locate the Republican Guard's defensive positions so they could be engaged by the full weight of the armored forces and artillery of the 1st Infantry Division. On the night of 23-24 February, in accordance with General Norman Schwarzkopf's plan for the ground assault called Operation Desert Saber, 7th Corps raced east from Saudi Arabia into Iraq in a maneuver later nicknamed the Hail Mary. The Corps had 2 goals: to cut off Iraqi retreat from Kuwait, and to destroy 5 Republican Guard divisions near the Iraq-Kuwait border that might attack the Arab and Marine units moving into Kuwait to the south. Initial Iraqi resistance was light and scattered, and the 2nd ACR fought only minor engagements until the 25th of February. The primary battle was conducted by 2nd ACR's 3 squadrons of about 4,000 soldiers, along with the 1st Infantry Division's 2 leading brigades, who attacked and destroyed the Iraqi 18th Mechanized Brigade and 37th Armored Brigade of the Tawakalna Division, each consisting of between 2,500 to 3,000 personnel. Plan: the 2nd ACR was to advance east, locate and engage the enemy and determine his dispositions, and then allow the mechanized brigades of the 1st ID to pass through to finish destroying the Iraqis. The 2nd ACR's limit of advance changed during the operation. 7th Corps Fragmentary Plan 7, issued during the night of February 25-26, made the 60 Easting the regiment's initial limit of advance. After 2 ACR made contact with the Republican Guard's security zone, Corps changed the limit to the 70 Easting. Along that line, the 1st ID would pass through the regiment and push on to objectives further east. Lieutenant General Frederick M. Franks, Jr., the commander of the 7th Corps, ordered Colonel Don Holder, the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment commander, to locate the enemy and to avoid becoming decisively engaged. The regiment had its 3 armored cavalry squadrons operating on line with 2nd Squadron in the north, 3rd Squadron in the center and 1st Squadron in the south. The 4th Squadron flew reconnaissance and attack missions chiefly in the northern and central zones. Unusually for a corps covering force, the regiment lacked a reserve tank or mechanized infantry battalion. Weather restricted flight operations severely, however, and kept 4th Squadron grounded for about half of the daylight hours. Moving through the Republican Guard's security area on the morning of the 26th, the regiment encountered Iraq's heavily armored Tawak-al-Na Division in the north and the 12th Iraqi Armored Division in the center and south. All Iraqi units occupied well-constructed defensive emplacements and had prepared alternate positions which enabled them to reorient to the west to face 7 Corps' attack. The 12th Armored Division's assignment to the Republican Guard was not known at the time of the engagement. Despite extensive aerial and artillery bombardment by U.S. forces, most Iraqi units defending along the 70 Easting remained effective. The regiment employed artillery fire from the supporting 210th Field Artillery Brigade, C Battery 4th 27th FAMLRS, airstrikes, and attack helicopters against the Republican Guard units as the armored cavalry squadrons moved east through the security zone. Sandstorms slowed this movement throughout the day, restricting visibility to as little as 400 meters. Approach to the 70 Easting 2DACA began the 26th of February on the 7th Corps objective smash, still oriented to the northeast. In the early morning hours, Lt. Colonel Scott Marcy's 3rd Squadron fought companies of the Iraqi 50th Armored Brigade, which had moved into the regiment's southern area, to confirm reports that Allied units were in the vicinity. At 0522 the regiment received Corps Frag Plan 7, which adjusted its zone and objective and directed all corps units to move east to attack units of the Republican Guard. The order adjusted the boundary between 2ACR and the 1st UK Armoured Division to the south, and the early movements of the day involved reorienting the regiment's squadrons and coordinating with 1st UK Armoured Division along the new boundary. The 80 Northing, the aviation squadron led by Lt. Colonel Don Olson, established a screen along the 50 Easting by 7 a.m., and by 8 a.m., the armored cavalry squadrons had moved into their new zones. 3rd Squadron, operating in the center, destroyed a T-72 tank before 8 a.m., establishing the first ground contact with the Iraqi Republican Guard's Tawak-al-Na Division. All 3 squadrons were in contact with security forces by 9 a.m., but a violent sandstorm blew into the area and movement to the regiment's limit of advance, the 60 Easting, took until 11 a.m. Air cavalry operations ceased just after 9 a.m., and would not resume until afternoon. Lt. Colonel Tony Isaacs' 1st Squadron meanwhile encountered scattered enemy positions in the south and by noon had reported destroying 23 T-55 tanks, 25 armored personnel carriers, 6 artillery pieces and numerous trucks. Lt. Colonel Mike Cobb's 2nd Squadron troops all reported resistance from small Tawak-al-Na Division security outposts, while 3rd Squadron undestroyed similar outposts in the regimental center. Lt. Gen. Franks visited the regiment's main command post just before 1 p.m. There, the regimental executive officer, Lt. Colonel Roger Jones in the S2, Major Steve Campbell, briefed him on the situation and informed him that sensors were reporting movement of tracked vehicles to the north out of the regiment's zone. By 3 p.m., 3rd Armored Division had reached the 50 Easting and begun to move abreast of the regiment to the north. 1st Infantry Division's movement to join the fight was taking longer than expected, however. Lt. General Franks therefore directed the 2nd Armored Cavalry to continue its attack as far as the 70 Easting and to make contact with the Republican Guard's main defenses and prevent their movement. At the same time, he ordered the regiment to avoid becoming decisively engaged. Colonel Holder issued a fragmentary order at 3:20 to comply with the Corps Commander's directive, and by 3:45 2nd Squadrons E and G troops were in contact with well-organized defenses of the Tarmac-Ulna Division. At the same time, the 3rd and 1st Squadrons in the center and south moved to clear their zones, encountering T-72s in 3rd Squadron's north and T-62 and T-55 tanks of the Iraqi 12th Armored Division further south. 4th Squadron's air scouts rejoined the operation as the weather cleared around 3 p.m. Air scouts identified enemy defenses to the front of 2nd and 3rd Squadrons, and attack helicopters struck several of the security outposts. By 1610, further south near the east-west UTM coordinate line 00 northing, 2nd ACRZ troop received fire from an Iraqi dismounted outpost, a Dugan Iraqi ZSU-23-4 and several occupied buildings in an Iraqi village. The American scouts returned fire with their tanks and Bradleys, silenced the Iraqi guns, took prisoners, and continued east. They advanced 3 more kilometers east to the 70 Easting line. More enemy fire came in and was immediately returned. 73 Easting. The Battle of 73 Easting refers narrowly to the violent armored combat action that took place in the final hours of 2nd ACR's covering force operation in the zone of 2nd Squadron and in the northern third of the 3rd Squadron zone. In the battle, 4 of the 2nd ACR's armored cavalry troops, Troop C, G, and I with Troop K contributing to I Troops fight, defeated 2 enemy brigades, the Tarmac-Ulna Division's 18th Brigade and, later in the day, the 9th Armored Brigade. The defending Iraqi forces, elements of Tarmac-Ulna's 18th Mechanized Brigade and the 12th Armored Division's 9th Armored Brigade, had arrived in their positions on the evening of the 24th of February and had oriented to the west to protect the main supply route, the IPSA pipeline road. Just to their rear, the Iraqi resistance that 2 ACR met on the previous day had been from the 50th Armored Brigade, whose mission had been to cover the preparation of that defense. The battle was part of the larger operation, and, as it went on, the 3rd and 1st Squadron troops in the southern part of the zone continued to fight through the security area of the Republican Guard and fix enemy units of the 12th Armored Division. 1st Squadron. The regiment's southernmost squadron cleared its zone of remnants of the 50th Armored Brigade before making contact with the 37th Brigade of the 12th Iraqi Armored Division, fighting to the south of the Tarmac-Ulna Division. Scout and attack helicopters of 4th Squadron and 2-1 Aviation Battalion supported the fight as weather allowed. The regiment moved from the 60 Easting with 8 of its 9 cavalry troops generally abreast of each other. The operation escalated into a full-out battle as E Troop maneuvered to the 70 Easting around 3:45 p.m. Heavy combat then spread to the south as I Troop of the 3rd Squadron closed the gap between the 2 squadrons and joined the fight. G troops attacked to the north of Captain H.R. McMaster's E Troop made contact with defending units farther east, and combat there became intense around 4:45 p.m. Fighting continued into darkness as the Iraqi division commander reinforced the 18th Brigade with his 9th Armored Brigade in the G Troop zone. At 4:10 p.m., Eagle Troop received fire from an Iraqi infantry position in a cluster of buildings at UTM PU 6801. Eagle Troop Abrams and Bradleys returned fire, silenced the Iraqi guns, took prisoners, and continued east with the 2 tank platoons leading. The 12 M1A1 tanks of Eagle Troop destroyed 28 Iraqi tanks, 16 personnel carriers and 30 trucks in 23 minutes with no American losses. At about 4:20 Eagle crested a low rise and surprised an Iraqi tank company set up in a reverse slope defense on the 70 Easting. Captain McMaster, leading the attack, immediately engaged that position, destroying the first of the 8 enemy tanks to his front. His 2 tank platoons finished the rest. 3 kilometers to the east McMaster could see T-72s in prepared positions. Continuing his attack past the 70 limit of advance, he fought his way through an infantry defensive position and onto high ground along the 74 Easting. There he encountered and destroyed another enemy tank unit of 18 T-72s. In that action the Iraqis stood their ground and attempted to maneuver against the troop. This was the first determined defense the regiment had encountered in its 3 days of operations. Still, the Iraqi troops had been surprised because of the inclement weather and were quickly destroyed by the better trained and better equipped American troops. After defeating that force, McMaster sent a scout platoon of 2 Bradleys north to regain contact with Troop G. In doing that, the scout platoon encountered another Iraqi tank position of 13 T-72s which they destroyed with tow missiles. Other 2nd ACR troops I, K, and G joined the fight minutes later. Iron Troop of 3rd Squadron had halted around the 67 Easting to control the limit of advance with its tank cannon. As the troop moved north to secure its northern boundary around 4:45, it came under fire from the same group of buildings E Troop had fought through an hour earlier. Captain Dan Miller, commanding I Troop, silenced the resistance with return fire, then attacked to the 70 Easting. There he confronted T-72s in defensive positions south of those E Troop had just destroyed. With initial support from Captain Mac Hassid's K Troop, Miller's tanks destroyed 16 enemy tanks on that position and then attacked through it. Just beyond the defenses, I Troop observed another formation of enemy tanks moving in its direction and attacked it with tank and tow fire. During that engagement, tow missile fire from a K Troop Bradley struck and destroyed an I Troop Bradley, wounding all 3 crewmen. Before returning to positions along the 70 Easting, I Troop located the defending battalion's command post and destroyed its command bunker and security forces. By 4:40, Captain Joe Sarchano's G Troop had gained a position on a ridge overlooking a wadiat and parallel to the 73 Easting, north of E Troop. As the regiment's northernmost unit, G Troop secured an open flank until the 3rd Armored Division's cavalry squadron arrived to occupy its own positions along the 70 Easting. Sarchano's men engaged Iraqi 18th Brigade tanks in defensive positions initially. Very quickly, however, G Troop found itself facing counterattacks by tank units of both the Tamakalna Division and the Iraqi 12th Armored Division. Additionally, other Iraqi units attempted to retreat to the north along the wadi, and that led them directly into G Troop's position. By 6:30, the first of several waves of Iraqi T-72 and T-55 tanks advanced into the wadi. Fierce fighting ensued as wave after wave of tanks and infantry charged the troop. Combat became so intense at times that only massed artillery and mortar fires, attack helicopters and Air Force close air support prevented the enemy from closing with G Troop. At one point, a military intelligence platoon from the 2nd ACR's 502nd Me Company had to suspend its signal intelligence operation and return the fire of Iraqi soldiers who exited a burning BMP-1 and continued to attack. During the 6-hour battle, the G Troop fire support team called in 720 howitzer and MLRS rounds while using its own mortars continually to turn back attackers at close range. By 9 p.m., G Troop had expended all its tow missiles and was becoming desperately short on 25mm and 120mm cannon ammunition. To remedy the emergency, Lt. Colonel Copper sent his tank company, Captain Bruce Tyler's Company H, to relieve the troop. By then, G Troop had destroyed at least 2 companies of Iraqi armor. Hundreds of Iraqi infantrymen and their lightly armored transporters lay scattered on the wadi floor. G Troop lost 1 M3 Bradley to Iraqi IFV fire and 1 soldier, Sergeant Nels A. Moller, the gunner of the Bradley, was killed. The Bradley's tow launcher was inoperative, and the 25mm Bushmaster cannon had jammed. While the crew was attempting to get the cannon back in action, an Iraqi BMP-1 hit the vehicle's turret with 73mm cannon fire. Moller died instantly, and the remainder of the crew evacuated the damaged vehicle. Artillery fire and airstrikes played a large role in the battle, especially in the far north. In direct support of 2nd ACR, Colonel Garrett Bourne's 210th FA Brigade fired missions out to the 78 Easting. Close air support missions struck targets in greater depth, preventing some Iraqi units from closing with G Troop or escaping the battle area. Attack helicopters flew in support of air scouts at key intervals during the day, and the 2-1 Aviation Battalion's Apache helicopters, led by Lt. Colonel John Ward, destroyed 2 batteries of enemy artillery and struck march units along the IPSA Pipeline Road at 4:30 p.m., just as the battle began in earnest. In total, the regimental fire support officer reported employing 1,382 rounds of 155 mm howitzer ammunition and 147 MLRS rockets on February 26. The 210th FA Brigade commander estimated that his 2 FA battalions and single MLRS C battery 4th 27th FA destroyed 17 tanks, 7 APCs, 6 artillery pieces and around 70 other vehicles. The number of vehicles damaged by artillery was greater. The number of enemy infantry casualties caused by indirect fire proved impossible to determine, but almost certainly exceeded the 30 infantrymen claimed. Sporadic fire continued throughout the night, but no major engagements occurred after 10 p.m. The regiment used artillery fire and some close air support between the end of active fighting and the arrival of the 1st Infantry Division at the line of contact. Based on the intelligence gained during the battle, Colonel Holder advised the Corps commander that the 1st Infantry Division should pass through the southern units of the regiment. Committing the division in that area would keep it clear of the chaotic post-battle conditions to the north and, more importantly, would steer the main attack around now-known positions of the Republican Guard divisions. Lt. General Franks accepted that recommendation, and beginning around 2 a.m., 2 brigades of the 1st Infantry Division passed through the regiment's positions along the 70 Easting. When the division had completed passage of all its combat units around 6 a.m., the 2nd Cavalry Regiment became part of 7 Corps Reserve.